You're listening to the Embrace Family Recovery Podcast, a place for real conversations with people who love someone with the disease of addiction. Now here is your host, Margaret Swift Thompson.
Welcome back to the Embrace Family Recovery Podcast. Today, I am joined once again by Patrick Flanagan. We continue his story this week with highlighting the importance of family involvement in recovery. From launching the Lionhouse Brownstone Women's Recovery Residence, which includes family recovery coaching as part of its program, Patrick has made it his mission to create a system where families heal alongside their loved ones with this disease. Let's rejoin Patrick.
The Embrace Family Recovery Podcast.
So with that awareness of the obsession and preoccupation and the disease of addiction that you had, did your wife or children ever make you drink?
No.
Could they now?
No. There's nothing. No. I mean, I'm not saying I couldn't relapse now.
Right.
And my drinking in those 3 years, I didn't say I relapsed 10 times. I never got sober. Right. So I have actually got sober this time. Could anybody make me drink? No. I mean, the things that would make me drink is separation from my higher power, separation from my program of Alcoholics Anonymous, separation from the spiritual aspect of the program. I mean, every single story I hear when somebody relapses starts almost the same way. Stop going to meetings, stop talking to my sponsors, stop hanging out with guys in the program. Right. And then, I mean, it's just I'm keenly aware of that. And that's why, like I said, I have 2 home groups that I never miss. If I'm in town, I do AA service work. I work in the industry, but I keep my program and my work separate. I was told that early on by a guy at the retreat who works there. We used to work there, Sol Ryan, and he said keep them separate, and I did, and I consciously do that to this day, is keep my program and my work separate. That's what would cause me to go back out is separation from my program.
And I think that cannot be said enough, loud enough, often enough for family members to work to back from that cliff edge of being on high alert to understanding they cannot make someone use and they cannot make someone recover. It is not something that they have the capacity to do. Speaking of recoveries from the family side, were your family engaging in anything to educate and get counseling or understanding for themselves? Was that something that they took part in or were offered?
A little bit, yeah. My daughters went to the retreats, the family program at the retreat. My oldest daughter, Josie, got a lot out of it, I think. I think that they went with their mother we were going through a divorce at the time, so I'm not sure how engaged she was in the deal. Mm-hmm. But Josie got a lot out of that. Julia was a little young for it, I think, at the time. And what I did when I did get sober, about a year into it, I kind of forced all 3 of my kids to go to therapy 3 times. And I was like, you guys just go to therapy 3 times and see what you like. And Josie is still going to therapy 3 years later. The other 2 did it, and maybe they'll go back. I exposed them to it.
Exactly.
To try to get them exposure. They didn't love it, but Josie really likes it. So, I'm trying. I exposed them to it, and yeah, they did some work. They didn't do any Al-Anon or anything.
Seeds have been planted.
Seeds, yeah, exactly, right? Yeah. So,
yeah, and I think that's huge. I think the fact that your children were exposed, just like your intervention wasn't what helped you get sober at the time, those interventions you've offered your children planted seeds. What they do with them is up to them, just like what you did with it was up to you. And it took you a little while to get to your own place of, okay, this is what I actually do need, and I'm willing.
Yeah. And my children are, they're young adults. They're 24, 23, and 20, right? So you can't force them to do anything. You can expose them. You can share your experience, kind of like my AA program. I can share my experience. They know my experience. I know that they're comfortable coming to me if they have any problems themselves. So yeah, I exposed them and planted the seed.
Yeah. And continue to work your program out loud, which helps them see the impact of a program.
Yeah, that was super cool. So my son, he graduated St. Thomas and he said, Dad, can I just move in with you for like a month until I get, settled, right?
Yeah.
Well, he just moved out like a year and a half later, he lived with me. So, which was great. We got on great. It went well. But he saw this meeting I have at my house on Monday nights, every Monday night at 8:00. He 10, 12, 14 guys would stream in and he'd go to his room and he saw that I was engaged and he saw, we were doing the deal. So that was really cool. And, he subbed on our softball team a couple times. We played in the sober softball league. And so, yeah, it was great. They know I'm engaged.
Yeah. Well, the other piece that's great about it is you're role modeling as a man to his son and your daughters too, that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to let people help you. It's okay to reach out for help. It's okay to so many factors that go against societal's expectation of how we show up in our families as the patriarch of a family, right?
Well, and I showed them what happens when you don't, right? They lived through what happens when you don't.
It's true.
They saw the disaster that happens when you just internalize everything and make sure everybody else is happy. And just, they've seen both sides of it. So yeah, but it's good now, but it was bad for a while. And they saw that and they lived through it, and we don't forget it, but we don't live in the past either.
Right. So you're in the sober house, you're 45, which is uncommon at that point, probably to be in the sober house. I can imagine you're running with all different people, but some youngers. You're at the car wash working. You were in the financial world. Where does the story go from there in recovery?
Yeah. So I was in the sober house and I was sharing a room at 45 years old in the sober house. And my roommate had a job in Stillwater, which is about a half hour, 45 minutes. And he had to take like 5 buses to get there. And I had a car. I had the blow and go, like the starter from the DWI, but I had a car. So I said, hey, why don't I just take you in the morning? And it was the first real piece of service work I'd ever done in my life, like where I just helped somebody that I didn't really know and without expecting anything in return. And so we drive to work, and he was super appreciative. It saved him like $7 on the bus and like a half hour, 45 minutes every morning. So it was a good deal. And we had a little one-on-one AA meeting on the way to his work. And it was just, I just got the bug for service work, right? That, starting your day off, helping somebody else out, makes your day go pretty good.
Right.
And so that was kind of how I got, the service work. I started doing more AA service work, started going on a lot of 12-step calls and pulling guys out of tough situations and helping them out and things like that. And then
so I need to stop you there. I can hear my family members in the background going, you're what? You're in early recovery? You're pulling people out of dangerous places? How is that safe?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Never did it alone. First of all, that's, I remember we had another 45-year-old in the sober house disappeared one day. And we found out he was in a hotel room in downtown St. Paul. So 3 of us from the sober house went together. That is super important. And went and found him in a pretty rough state and got him to detox. And I remember being with my therapist the next day or then a couple of days later. And my therapist asked me, are you hanging out with the winners in the AA? I said, I am, but this experience happened to me. And I said, it was pretty crazy. And he said, yeah, he said, you're looking at your disease from like a hot air balloon and you're seeing how quick and how fast and how bad it can get. And it was like a 45-year-old lawyer with a law practice, went from having a pizza at the sober house to 3 days later, in a really rough spot and ended up in detox. And so doing that can go one way or another. That can suck you in, or it can show you, Jesus, that happened quick and bad, and I don't want that for me. And so I better continue on what I'm doing, positive.
And I think it's good for families to hear this, because I think family members want to put you in bubble wrap and put you on top of this little soft, safe space, because thinking that any stressors are going to cause you to use. And we've established already that nothing causes us to relapse, go back to use, unless we're not working our program and using the tools of recovery. when it comes to service work, there is service work that puts you in the front lines and you see things and experience things. And I really appreciate what you just shared, which is it was an opportunity to see where I would be, you would be, if you didn't work your program.
Yeah.
You never want to see it on, anyone suffering like that. It's not the ideal, but it helps you, if you look at it that way, to recognize there by the grace of my higher power go I. It's also, I heard you loud and clear, really important to use your network of recovery people when you are facing those types of situations, that you don't go alone.
Yeah, the odds aren't great, right? The odds are tough in recovery. And if you're in a house of 12 guys, in a sober house of 12 guys, there's 4 or 5 doing the deal. There's 2 or 3 that are probably going to relapse and struggle while you're there. There's 2 or 3 that, may not be engaged and may be there because their parents want them to be there or their wives want them to be there. And there's 4 or 5 guys that are doing the deal and engaged and want to be there. And I tell people, find those 4 or 5 guys, stick in that herd, get their numbers, call them, text them, stay in that loop, because those are the guys you want to hang out with and be part of. And if you start listening to the negative guys, they are complaining all the time about sober living and this and that, it's just going to suck you into that bad mindset.
Mm-hmm. Appreciate that too. I think it's also just really good for you to share your story so that families out there can hear it and realize some of the worry and fear and powerlessness that they feel, the out of controlness that they feel. It's not reinforced, but it's like they get to see that in your journey as a recovering man, you have faced challenges and stayed sober because of the tools, because of the program, and that you can't live in this world of being fully protected because you just never know what will be a trigger or what won't be. So it's more about living your life and recognizing the odds are not in your favor. However, I've been told in the programs, if I work my program like my life depends on it, I have a life.
Yeah, a couple of things, from a family perspective, my ex-wife, she used to use the 3 C's of Al-Anon, right? You didn't cause it, can't control it, can't cure it. And it drove me nuts. I hated it back then. And now I tell families that all the time because they're accurate. But yeah, the 3 C's and are just, they're accurate for family members.
This podcast is made possible by listeners like you.
Hi, everyone. I am Margaret Swift Thompson of the Embrace Family Recovery podcast. I wanted to jump on in this bumper and just share how grateful I am that each and every one of you has chosen to listen, review, share this podcast. My intention is that anyone impacted by the family disease of addiction will get the opportunity to feel less alone and understand more about their journey and the disease with which they grapple one day at a time. If you would be so kind as to follow, subscribe, whether it be to the podcast platform or YouTube, if you would share with at least 3 friends this episode or any episode of the podcast. And also, if you have not written a review of the value you get from this podcast, please do so. That means so much to me and helps more people out there who won't know about this podcast without us doing this get an opportunity to find the support they so deserve. I appreciate you, and I thank you. Take care of you.
You're listening to the Embrace Family Recovery podcast. Can you relate to what you're hearing? Never miss a show by hitting the subscribe button. Now back to the show.
So you work at the laundry. You've got this service part of your life happening. You're starting to help people without expectation. You're driving them to Stillwater. How do we move forward to leave the world behind that you once were doing career-wise to where you are now?
Yeah. So help, good people and good advice. I found this house over in Como Park neighborhood of St. Paul, right by the State Fairgrounds online. And I just drove over there and looked at it. I think it was an open house. And I walked through it and I was like, oh my God, this would be a perfect sober house. Mm-hmm. 7,200 square feet, 8 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, and mint condition inside. A family had really taken care of it, but in a neighborhood of 2,500 square foot homes, and there's a 7,200 square foot home. So there wasn't much of a market for the home. Right. It had been for sale for a while. So I put together a little business plan for a sober house, and I was 9 months sober. And I went to a gentleman, Tom Rothstein, who is a long-term recovered AA member and a very, very successful and very, very nice businessman from Minnesota. And I said, Tom, what do you think? And he went and looked at it, and he signed the paperwork to get the loan from the bank and backed us. And so he and I have been 50-50 partners on it. I do the work, and he's the bank. And so we opened up, and we were walking through it, and I was dating a woman at the time, Tara Heald, and I'm still dating her now, and she's a big part of the operation now. And she said, you got to turn this into a women's sober house. And I was like, wow, I don't know how I could do that. And then I went to Tom and I said, what do you think? What do you think of that? And he said, yeah, he goes, there's a huge need for that, because his daughter had struggled with an addiction, and she had been to multiple women's sober houses that were really, really rough places. And so we decided we're going to turn it into a women's sober living house. And the coolest part of that story is that now Tara has moved on and is running the Lionhouse Brownstone, which is our second home. And Clara, Tom's daughter, is running the Lionhouse, 5 or 6 years recovered and just killing it. She's a PRS, peer recovery specialist in Minnesota, and she helps me with interventions too. And she's just killing it. And so it's just the coolest part of the story is that I have this team now of women that I do the businesses, I pay the bills and stuff like that, and do some marketing. But the women that run those two houses are just amazing women.
9 months sober?
9 months sober. Yeah.
So, the clinical hat from years ago are going, okay, well, no major life changes in the first year of recovery. We hear that a lot. And you dive in head first to not even a men's sober house, but a women's sober house.
Yeah, I didn't really know what I was getting into. I think that ignorance is bliss or something, or, being ignorant.
Maybe that early recovery optimism.
Yeah, I mean, something along the lines, or, yeah. But I knew that there was a need.
There is, yes.
And I knew we had some passionate people. I knew I had surrendered. I'm not saying I couldn't relapse or anything. That can happen at any time, but I knew I had surrendered, and I knew the obsession to drink was gone. So I was confident in that. And I knew that, I don't know, I felt like I needed to help people. And I knew, there's 4,000 sober living beds in the Twin Cities. And, I probably wouldn't really recommend more than a couple hundred of them. There's some rough ones. And so I wanted to set the standard and create a pretty cool atmosphere. And Tom's daughter, Clara, had been through some rough places. Tara was willing to come on and really help build that place. And she did. And yeah, it's just been awesome and not easy.
So for families listening, I hope they heard what you said that was so powerful, was that at 9 months, you spoke to an elder, if you like, in the recovery world, but also a business person. You also have surrounded yourself by people who can be mentors and support people, and then brought on a team. What it speaks to beautifully is the connections we make in the rooms that we just don't know what they're going to be one day. Because a lot of family members are like, they're going to hang out with a bunch of fill in the blank, and don't understand those networks and those relationships and the support that is offered in the rooms and also around the rooms for potential jobs or help in other aspects. Has that been your experience all along?
100%. I just 95% of the people I hang out with are in recovery. I go on trips with people in recovery. I was 2 years sober. I got invited to go to Scotland with 7 other guys from AA to go on to play golf for 8 days. It was awesome. And one guy backed out. I ended up bringing my son with us, which was just totally wild. But yeah, everybody I hang out with is in recovery. That's my network now. And my old life is just, it's funny. I used to be a member of a golf club, and I go back there and I play about once or twice a summer. And every time I do, it's just, I'm so grateful that I got out of that life, because I was drinking myself to death there. And And I'm so grateful that the people in recovery that I hang out with now, and I hang out with 25-year-olds, 65-year-olds, it doesn't matter. It's just, that's my people. That's my crowd. That's where I'm comfortable. And we do help each other out, whether it's, moving a couch or giving a ride or business advice or all of that stuff, school advice, and things like that. It's all part of it. And I love it.
And I don't think families can appreciate that. And so I love that you're openly sharing about it so they understand that when they think they have to fix, manage, and control, it's such a falsehood taught to them by their disease, because if they give their loved one the room, the dignity, and their recovery, wow, they will have opportunities beyond what the family could do for them.
Yeah. I mean, I totally, I think I always talk to families about, you're not a sober house manager, like, when
or a counselor or a coach,
right,
or their higher power.
Or that's a big one too, right? The higher power thing. You're not their higher power. But when somebody either leaves treatment or leaves sober living to go back home, I always, if I'm engaged with the family, I tell them, you're not a sober house manager. You're not there to monitor a sober link or a breathalyzer or whatever. Like, if they're going to drink at home, you call me and we'll help. But you don't get engaged on a daily basis with their recovery. It's not going to work. It's just going to create tension.
Which leads me to one of the things that you've incorporated in your sober house. Before we go to that, because I'm excited about it, let's go back to explaining to the average person listening who's probably been down this road or hasn't for recovery. There's, inpatient treatment, outpatient treatment. There's all these levels of care. What would you say is a good definition of sober living in a sober house?
Yeah. Good definition. A 6-month commitment to being present and living in a accountable, sober living house with structure, and communication with the family members. It doesn't have to be the Ritz-Carlton, but it certainly has to be, something that they're proud to live in. At least I think it helps. But really, it's about the guys and gals who get engaged with the community in the sober house, who are, the guys that I see relapse are the guys that show up 15 minutes before curfew and leave first thing in the morning and are never really part of it. And a lot of sober living allows you to do that. Good sober living, I think, adds structure to it and accountability and meetings. And we at the Lion House require 3 to 4 AA meetings or NA meetings a week. We require a sponsor. We require Tuesday night house dinner. We require a chore. You're part of the house.
Right.
So being part of AA and then part of that specific house is a real big part of it. So if I'm talking to family members, I encourage them to let them be engaged with the house. Don't call them back. If it's in town, they can go home on the weekends and go see their kids' sporting events or whatever, but they also need to spend time at the house and be present and be engaged with the other guys or gals and with the senior peers and with the managers, who are usually always people in recovery,
right?
To learn and to be engaged. So it's just an engagement commitment. And we always ask for a minimum of 6 months. We've had a lot of gals with success stay with us a year plus, but the time heals, I think, in recovery and engagement and family members. We do have a pretty extensive family engagement on our brownstone property. And we have some family engagement on the other one too. And that's a big part of it.
And that's what was exciting. Another piece of why I wanted to speak with you, because you're doing something that I think is pretty atypical, in that you have a family recovery coach who works with your women and their families while in sober living, which I am so excited about, because one of my pet peeves, having been in the treatment world, I'm very familiar with it. You have someone go through treatment 30 days, if they're in long-term care, 60, 90, right? The family get invitation to a family program, which can be 1 day to 3 days in person, online, depending on where they are, if that. And then they'll get a call with a progress report if there's a release of information. They'll hopefully get a call on discharge if the release of information is put out. But the frustration with family not getting it, in my humble opinion, is because family haven't been given it. They haven't been given the tools, the exposure, the resources to know how to do this different, because they haven't had support and education and resources given to them like the person who's in treatment has been given. So to hear you doing that is phenomenal. Like, kudos to you and your organization for bringing Lori. Isn't it Lori who's doing it?
Lori Healy, yeah.
Yeah. It's such a great thing. So tell families about that, because that is not typical in sober living.
No, I don't know anybody who's doing it. But we learned it from the first Lionhouse that, we were spending a ton of time with the family members. Typically at that property, it was typically parents. Right. We got a lot of younger people at that property. It's a more moderately priced. It's $9.25 a month. So we were getting a lot of younger people and spending a ton of time with the families and the moms and the dads. Mm-hmm. So when we looked at that and we opened up the brownstone, it's a smaller property. There's only 5 guests in there, 6 bedroom in the basement for our staff member. But we looked at that. It got to do some family engagement. And I'd met Lori before and was blown away with what she did. And we really learned that, I think especially for women's recovery and is trauma and family, like getting at the trauma with a good therapist and good, support team is super important for the individual.
Yep.
But then getting that family to do that work is super important. So yeah, we baked it into our whole program. And we made it required. It's not an option. We're not a la carte. And so some people, we've gotten a lot of calls in our first year of being open saying, we're not cheap either. We're $8,500 a month to live there. And I know that's an investment. But I look at that as, $50,000 for a 6-month commitment, when some of these treatment centers are $50,000 for 30 days, and you're getting the way what you just said is not a ton of engagement on the family side. So I talk to families a lot and they say, well, hey, can we do it cheaper if we don't do the family program? And I said, yeah, you can, but not with us. We're requiring it. We want all the women not only to engage with their families, but then to engage with themselves, that they're all doing the same program. Mm-hmm. And so Lori and Tara have this amazing system where basically the guest walks in and goes with Tara, and Tara's the personal recovery coach for that guest and works one-on-one with that guest daily almost during the week and is on call. But then the family goes with Lori,
right,
does all the family work, the geneograms, the boundary work, the all of that stuff. And then after about a month or so, every family's a little different, but usually about a month, they come together for a family meeting. And we have a membership at the Coven Women's Co-working Space here in St. Paul that we do a lot of that at. Sometimes they actually do it at my house here if that's not available. But then the families come together and kids and husbands and significant others, parents. And I got to tell you, there hasn't been one of those first meetings with the families. And I'm not in there, but I get all the reports and that the family hasn't said, we've never done anything like this. And most of our guests so far to date, all of them really have been women who have been to multiple treatments and never did sober living, but had never done any of this family work. And so it's super impactful. We're kind of on our second, we've been open a year. So we're on our second kind of wave of guests right now. And in the first wave, we not only did the family work, but then we did, what does going home look like? Lori and Tara worked with everybody in the family about what does home look like now? What are the boundaries? What's the relapse plan if that happens? And so, yeah, the family engagement, Lori and Tara have they have a really good team effort and with the families. It's pretty cool stuff.
It's beyond cool.
Yeah,
It's beyond cool. It is, because we call it a family disease in the world. And sadly, we don't give much more than crumbs to family. And it's a setup for both sides of the journey, because the need to understand what the disease has done to each of us and how we survive in it and what survival skills have served us, but need to be let go of. And now how to get through this moving forward when the fear is so prevalent and the worry, and to have somebody there in a parallel experience while their loved one's getting the healing and support and help they can get theirs. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, sometimes it's a tough, some families, they just want to send their loved one to treatment for 30 days. You fix them, send them back to us. And it just doesn't work. Right. We both know that. And so we've had families say, well, can my wife live at your sober house? But I don't want to do the family program. And we've turned people away because we're like, no, that's not, there are other places. And we're just really passionate about the family aspect of it. And we think,
and I hope you hold that always, Patrick, because I think that is so dignity filled for everyone involved. And the resistance that family shows comes from a place of incredible love, a lot of fear, trauma history, usually of what's gone on in the family, and a little bit of pissed offness, which comes in the door sometimes first. But under all of that is love and hurt and fear. And so if we can let that person come in, even if they're pissed, at least they're showing up. And I used to get a lot of backlash when I worked in extended care. I worked on Jelnik for a significant amount of time before that closed, if you're familiar with it, at Hazelden. And I would get, families calling me. So how many meetings are they going to go to when they leave? And how much they been doing this? And how much? And I'd be like, all right, so how are you? And how's Al-Anon going for you?
Yeah.
They weren't too happy with me, and that's okay. I would just say, one of the best things that I can say it, if you don't like it, you don't like it, but there is such a thing as healthy manipulation. And you want your loved one to get well, dive into your own recovery program, live it out loud. And I assure you that will have a bigger impact than ever telling them what to do or not do. Yeah. And families are like, what are you talking about? I don't want to go to some stupid meeting down in a cold night down the road and sit with a few people who are telling their sob stories. And I'm like, ever hear that from your loved one who's struggling with addiction?
Yeah. Right.
We got to suit up, all of us.
I learned a good one. An interventionist who's been doing it a lot longer than I have told me one time. We were talking about, we get asked to do interventions for free sometimes, for families that just can't afford our fees. And I asked him, how do you handle that? And he says, I tell the families to go to 3 Al-Anon meetings and then call me.
I agree.
If they're willing to do that, I'm willing to help. And if they're not, I don't. Yep. And I'm like, wow, that's a good one.
Great one. It's a great one. So how did the guy that sat in the back of the room pissed off, and I can just picture you at Bigelow, we might have been there at the same time. I can picture you at the back of that room steaming, just sitting there biding your time after an intervention. How does one go from that experience to now being a person who does interventions?
Yeah. So I started doing a lot of cool 12-step work, and I was told I was pretty good at it. And then my mentor who did the intervention on me is a gentleman, his name is Bill Tuderberg, and he's been doing interventions for probably 35 years. And he just said, well, you should hang your own shingle. And I was like, wow, all right. He's telling me, and he's been doing this a long time. And so I called around and I said, what does a good interventionist need if you want to be, registered or whatever? And they said, the CIP is the best you can do. So I dug into that, and I ended up getting my CIP, certified intervention professional, through the State Board of Pennsylvania, put together a website. And then I started doing some for free. I just started doing it to get better at it and to get the word out. And it's big time word of mouth business. And then I started to work a lot with the folks at the retreat. And I had to earn that though. And they thought, he's got 2 years sober. He was here and he was kind of a mess 3 years ago. I do an intervention. And if did it for a local and I brought a lot of people to the retreat, I would show up on Sundays on visiting day. And I'd visit the folks that I took to the retreat. And the staff at the retreat was like, wow, that's different. Not many interventionists are like showing up later. And so I'd be out there almost every Sunday and seeing guys and talking. And then, so the retreat started to say, that's good. And, that's different. And so they'd give my name out a little bit, and then I just started doing more and more. And I got known in my little AA circles as working and doing interventions. So that got the word out, and it just kind of snowballed. It took a while. It took a couple of years really to get to where I was, actually paying my bills, but I was passionate about it. And then the sober house, the women's sober house, that was an easy call to make to treatment centers. Hey, we opened up a beautiful women's sober house. They're like, oh my God, we don't have it. There aren't many out there. And that took a while to get rolling. But once that got my name in front of a lot of treatment centers, And then my mentor, Bill, would give my name out a lot. He's now spends a lot of time in Florida. So sometimes he would give some cases to me to help out. And it just spiraled and snowballed. And it became, now it's a fairly busy practice. I don't have many down weeks anymore.
Okay.
You know,
Again, that networking and connection, right?
networking and connection. And then I went back to grad school a couple of years ago, and I graduate Friday, 2 days from now. So,
Congratulations.
yeah, I wanted to learn the business side of healthcare because I think that the recovery industry could use some business stuff and sense. And so I went to the University of Minnesota School of Public Health, and they have a master's of healthcare administration, and I get my degree on Friday. So I've been doing that for years too. And again, it's been networking, and I did my capstone project on a proposal for an older adult treatment center. I'm a big believer that we need more older adult treatment centers that are focused on healthcare, the physical health of older adults with addiction and alcoholism, but then the aftercare plans and things like that for older adults. Because I'm getting more and more calls from people in their 40s about mom and dad.
Do you see value in interventionists having people who work with the families through the intervention process?
Yeah.
I know that there's a lot of stress. I get the calls from families who are trying to do the intervention themselves or end up getting an interventionist, and they tell me, I've had this chat and that chat, but I just feel like I need somebody to talk to, because otherwise I'm calling the interventionist and they're busy with my person. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a real team effort for us now. I have Tara as part of the team, Clara as part of the team. Lori and I have talked about, working in, because she's studying she's a craft certified family recovery coach, but she's also studying I'm drawing a blank, the family intervention style that's out there, more of a,
I know exactly what you're thinking of.
Non-confrontational, but it's more the invite only style. So yeah, it's a total team. I mean, I spend more time on the phone with families than I do, especially once I get the person to treatment. Like, it doesn't stop. I have a little bit different practice. I only take on, 4 to 6 clients at a time. I take it on as usually I do an intervention, and then I have a 3-month deal with the families, because I'm really involved where they're at treatment. I'm really involved with the aftercare plan, because I'm super passionate about the sober living and the aftercare being a big part of it. And I think that that's part of the whole process. So I am on the phone with families constantly. But my practice is starting to get busy, and Tara and Clara and Lori and Matt just come on as a therapist.
Right.
Starting to build a team, because you're right. You're 100% right with your line, where you're going with it. It is, especially if it's a big family, it's a lot, because everybody's involved, and everybody needs help. I do have good relationships with 3 or 4 therapists in the Twin Cities, where I tend to try to get the families to get engaged in therapy right away. So that helps. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's a big part of it.
It is. And it's one of the things I'm grateful for, Patrick, is that you see that. And first of all, like, hearing you stay with someone for 3 months through the treatment, it is wonderful, because I know of other interventionists who sadly bring them in and then sort of drop the ball unless a crisis happens and the family calls them. And that breaks my heart, because I know that interventions can be very expensive. And I think that family deserves some support. And so when I hear you have a team around them and referrals and resources, that's fantastic. And also what you're doing in your sober house is just makes me very happy.
Well, next time you're in the cities, you'll have to come check it out.
I would love to do that. I also need to say to those listening that Patrick's location is pretty sweet too, because you're in Minnesota.
Yes. And that is a huge thing. This community it's just different.
It is.
January 2nd, we're part of a team of other organizations that are sponsoring Wild Recovery Night. So last year we had 1,200 people for an AA meeting before a hockey game, which is just amazing, right? And And so we have sober hockey, we have sober softball, we have sober soccer. I know, we have all these events and all these meetings and all this community. I mean, you can't walk into a coffee shop in St. Paul and not see a big book, people talking about AA, whatever. It's ingrained in this community, and it's just amazing.
It is amazing. And it's one of the beautiful things about my time there that I so appreciate, because I go to other communities and there's recovery in those communities, but it's not like it is in Minnesota.
Yeah. I mean, and just like people always sometimes, well, how do I get a job in early recovery? I'm like, you walk down Grand Avenue and you can get a job at the hardware store, the coffee shop, the clothes. They're all familiar with hiring people in recovery in this community. And the meetings are just every day, everywhere. There's a meeting within a mile of my house every day, so it is a great community. Really, people from other parts of the country just don't seem. It's cold. I gave them that, but we embrace the cold, and there's just, and part of that community too is like there's so many cool people who work in recovery. There's so many passionate people.
I agree. And I thank you for your recovery, for your service, for your passion. And I thank you for being able to talk openly about not only your journey in recovery, but your family experiences and how hard those were, but also the hope and the healing that's coming from them, because I know the listeners will be really grateful to hear that, because they fear that won't be the case if they're still out there struggling,
Yeah, no, I'm all in. I love it.
Thank you, Patrick Flanagan, for taking the time to share your inspiring journey with us, and for the work you continue to do on your recovery journey through your team's intervention services, the Irishman and Associates, and the Stellar Recovery Residences for Women through the Lion Brownstone. Patrick, I appreciate your mission to include families in the recovery journey. Thank you for being a part of this podcast. Don't forget to come back next week, where we will have another solo episode of Moments with Margaret.
I want to thank my guest for their courage and vulnerability in sharing parts of their story. Please find resources on my website, embracefamilyrecovery.com. This is Margaret Swift Thompson. Until next time, please take care of you